and it is good that we are making our basmala with Dr. Ahmet Yıldız. It's very good, and I am very much glad that I am introducing him. I'm sure most of us already know that he is from Diyarbakir, born in 1966, and he had his BA degree at Boğaziçi University in political science and international relations. And then he joined at Bilkent University in Ankara. He received his PhD in 1998. And since then, he has been working as the coordinator, legislative expert in Human Rights Committee of Turkish Parliament. But of course, doesn't mean that he is connected to the parliament. He is not actively teaching in the universities. He is in fact teaching in many different universities, and he taught courses in modern political theory and history of political theory, comparative politics, and Ottoman modernization. He has many books and articles. Most of the books are in Turkish, but some of the articles are also in English. I'm sure you will be able to see. For example, the one that is very important that I see is İletişim Yayınları Ne Mutlu Türk'üm Diyebilene, Türk Ulusal Kimliğinin etnoseküler kuruluşu. The establishment of Turkish ethno-secular identity. That seems to cover the years between 1919 until 1938. And besides that, of course, he has many other books also, and especially on Ustaz Nursi. One of them that I can see in his CV that is forthcoming, inshallah, seems to be very good. If Necati Hocam acts on time, we can capture it and publish as Nursi publication, inshallah. Said Nursi'nin Düşünce Dünyası. So the intellectual world of Said Nursi. I suppose it can be translated like that. And as you can see, today, inshallah, we will be listening to him. I know he is very expert on this area with the title Justice, an Eternal Question. And then the question is, does a secular answer possible? Is a secular answer possible? So this is what we are going to be discussing, inshallah. Evet, Ahmet Hocam, please go ahead and start. I'm glad to introduce you.
Thank you very much, Alparslan Hocam. Selamun Aleyküm all. Today's topic is justice. Yes, it is an eternal question. It is a question asked in every age, in every society, by every thinker. Sometimes, of course, crises make it more urgent to answer this question, as was the case in ancient Athens. But this is so also in the Middle Ages and also in modern times. The question, I think, to some extent is a provoking question, because it is assumed that religion cannot offer any alternative to the modern day problems and the values. It doesn't have any answer. Of course, religion is here a general term. By religion, I mean Islam especially. I pose the question just the contrary and ask as, does a secular answer possible? Because we have many.
If I may interrupt, shall we record this?
Why not?
I think it would be better to record this.
Yeah, we are recording. We already started recording.
Okay.
Okay, like Nietzsche, which we will refer to him, we experience a transposition of all values in the modern times, and along with this transposition, my question is, does a secular answer possible among so many multiple answers? So first, I have an epigraph. The epigraph reads like this. In the end, I will come to the circle of justice, Ottoman circle of justice, and ask if it is a circle of justice or a circle of power or milk state. So we have we have just a question in terms of the relevance of justice. Justice is something, a question that is always relevant, that is always to the point, that is always modern. So it is always with us, not only in questions of, in times of crisis, but always it is important. So this eternal question has, of course, has been answered in all societies by so many different thinkers, by so many religions. I will try to understand justice, of course, in the modern context, and then try to see what side Nursi contributes in this regard. So I started with the two epigraphs. The first one is by Ali Semerkandi. His tomb is located in Ankara, near Ankara, I think. The word goes like this: the earth and the sky stand by justice, and justice is the basis of political authority, Hazreti Ömer. And some say, depending on the context, that political authority is the basis of justice. You may think it as just the opposite. Okay, so we start with the ayah from Baqarah, 279, the verse, La tazlimuna ve la tuzlemun. Zulmetmeyin ve zulme maruz kalmayın. From the translation of Muhammad said, you will do no wrong and neither will you be wronged. He translated as such. So just to remember this, we have many other, of course, verses to remember in the context of justice, but this is especially striking, I think. I put some themes that I will try to follow underpinning my presentation. Of course, I will have an introduction and dwell on the question of definition to a certain extent. And then the question that we need to keep in our mind is how to justify a definition. How can we justify it? The origin of justice. Of course, the aim of justice is another important question. Why do we need justice? So we have a matrix of classification to answer these two questions. And then I will relate the issue to the thought of Said Nursi. And I will try to have a question at the end of all sub-topics, I think. So we will have a question for debate. Of course, first, the question of definition. As I said, daily life is shaped by certain values and political theories. All political theories prioritize among these values. Some prefer, let's say, freedom, some prefer equality, some prefer order, law and order, public order, and some prefer justice. But justice seems to be the most central concept or value that shape our daily life. This is so today, and this was so yesterday. When we say a just society, we mean, when we say good society, we mean, in fact, a just society. Justice, despite it is so important, but we do not have any agreement about what is justice. Of course, we mean by justice fairness, rightness, morally correct in daily life. Along this, Raghib al-Isfahani, one of the handbooks in terms of comprehending the Quran, I think is his Mufradat, Quranic concepts book. There, Raghib al-Isfahani defines justice as to pay one's debt and claim his dues, to fulfill one's obligations and obtain his rights. Etymologically, justice in Arabic is adalet, is met with the term adalet and qist in Quran. These two concepts both are used in Quran, and adalet essentially is related to equality, notion of equality and equity, and nesafet. Nesafet, qist is the share taken, do share, means do share. So adalet, qist, and nesafet are three terms that can be used not totally interchangeably, but of course interconnectively. So justice is a normative moral concept, so it needs to be based on an epistemological understanding, which derives from an ontological perception. So it is intrinsically a moral or normative concept. As I said, by just something is just, when we say something is just, we mean it is morally good, beautiful, and by the opposite, we mean by unjust, we mean bad, or yeah, and yeah. So we, in fact, identify the terms, the concept of husn and kub in opposition. Of course, this is a question discussed in Kalamic, in Islamic theological tradition in Kalam. So is it something intrinsically just, or it is because justice is something attributed by Allah or any other secular authority? So it has both answers. The Maturidi tradition will accept, and Mu'tazili tradition will accept that something is beautiful or has her husn because of it is intrinsically so, and the Ash'ari tradition will say that no, something is beautiful or ugly because it is considered so by Sharia. These are two answers given to this question. So what is adalet? Is it something intrinsically just? That's why we call it just, or is it because it is defined as such by Sharia? That's why we consider it just. These are two different answers. Anyway, in short, we may define this traditional classic definition, which we find in Nursi as well, and in Plato too. Justice is about giving each person what he or she is due. Of course, this due is a contestable concept. What do we mean by due? It may mean, as we say, it may relate to, it may have a legal connotation, it may have a social connotation. So this due may relate to our rights, may relate to our needs, may relate to our deserts. We do not have any generalized concept of justice. We have competing concepts in the context of different things. So different principles of justice may be appropriate in different spheres of life, as I will mention about them. Essentially, I will divide justice in terms of legal and social ones. Put it, of course, at the background, an existential understanding of justice. So my question for debate in this slide, let's say, in this topic is this one: a Platonian discussion on justice via Socrates versus Thrasymachos. Is it really more profitable to live an unjust life than a just life? Let me give you an what was our Kaplan background information. In the first book of Republic, in the first chapter, in the first book of Plato, by Republics by Plato, Socrates and his friends, two brothers of Plato, and Thrasymachos, one of the sophists of the day, and his friends gathered together in the house of an Athenian, let's say, rich person, Kephalos, and they tried to discuss justice in connection to form, to build a new, society. How can we build a society? We start with providing our basic needs through a mason, through a tailor, and of course through a farmer. So if we have these three classes, then we may form a society, and how can we, you know, relate all these different classes, and how can we distribute what is produced justly? So they try to discuss this, and Socrates will spell the same definition that we had a little bit before. That is, justice is to keep every class in its state and give everyone what he or she is due. Thrasymachus will object to this definition and will say that what we mean by justice, justice is means to serve the interests of the stronger, nothing more than that. So justice is a covered word for, you know, to project the interests of the stronger here in the political and economic sense, or it may be, of course, in religious sense as well, because we have a religious elite, a privileged class in almost all societies. So why do we live a just life when just or justice means just to serve the interests of the stronger? So to live unjust is a more just or fair life if you take this in this sense justice. Of course, Socrates will object to this definition and will insist that his definition is right, and will force Thrasymachus to accept his definition, and Thrasymachus will just surrender. Okay, if you have any contribution in this regard, in this context of this question, then the floor is yours, or otherwise I may continue. Do you think justice is just a cover word for for serving the interests of the stronger? I think in practice, Thrasymachus seems to be right. Justice is practiced in all societies, almost all societies, in all times, as to serve the interests of the stronger, modern or ancient, religious or secular. Yes, if you want to make any contribution, you are welcome. Or I will go on my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ahmet Hocam. Anybody has any questions, comments, whatever? This is a topic that is extremely difficult for me, especially because we discuss this in philosophy quite a lot, and I am always perplexed about the concept of justice. But I am sure I can see already Collins and Mahshid, they have questions or comments. I think instead of, since we have time, reading from the chat box, let's start from Colin. Why don't you go ahead and make your comment and question?
Assalamu alaikum. It's just an observation, really. As far as the definition is concerned, as far as I understand it, and this is not my area of expertise, reading Quran and reading Risale, justice appears to mean putting things in their place. And it's linked inextricably to the notion of wise measuring. So as I see it, and this is, again, it's not an observation about what's been said, just to add to the definitional clarity, justice is a reflection of Allah's wise and purposeful measuring, his taqdir, from his attribute al-qadir. So justice, to go back to the idea of husn wa qub, is it zati or is it not? Is it arbitrary in a sense? Justice is inherent and it's not determined arbitrarily. So although we have definitional nebulosity surrounding the idea of justice, we do know that justice, whatever it is and whatever it denotes, is something which is there. It's not imaginary, it's not arbitrary. And I would side there with the Maturidis and maybe even the Mutazilites by saying that these are inherent. The problem is is how we deal with it and how we open up that definition and implement it within the context of human interpersonal relations. What I wanted to say was it's established, it is a fact. It's not something which is deemed arbitrarily. That was all.
Evet.
Yeah.
Ahmet Hoca, do you have a reply or?
Yeah. Of course it is so, but then it is just a matter of, let's say, not just a matter of, of course, abstraction. As Colin Hocam says, it's a matter of course, how it is translated into practice. However you claim that what is justice is this or that, I think everybody will, may come into an agreement to a certain extent, this way or that way, and accept the definition. But as we will see that we do not have a universal definition of justice. A universal definition of justice only will be possible with the acceptance of a universal lawmaker, a universal reason, which is, of course, as Bediüzzaman says, it is Şeriat Külliye. So the question is a question of practice, of course. Yeah,
I think, that's absolutely right. But we go one step further if we can actually establish that it is a thing, and then we close the door on those who say there's no such thing as justice. It's a human construct.
Yeah, then you will have an absolute relativity. It doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely not.
The aim is to, of course, to arrive at a general, definition that is acceptable to us all in this context, maybe Muslims, maybe all humanity, I don't know, this society or that society, which we will have such an approach, a society-based approach, but it is again a relative approach. But what is valuable, of course, is to have a universal definition, and this is only possible, if you accept a universal lawmaker. That's it. Otherwise, as I said, a secular answer possible? No, it's not possible.
Yeah, I think if I can add also one thing, relating things to their purpose of existence or creation. I think to follow Colin's line of thinking, that justice is really putting things into their rightful places in line with their creation. So without referring to the creator, the creation, the purpose of creation, and the measuredness in creation, justice is, I think, difficult to define. So there must be a relation, whether it is a divine creation, the things we see in nature, or our creations. Like let's say we make a car, okay, putting the parts into their rightful places, so that as a whole, that they serve their purpose for the greater purpose there.
Yeah.
Can I also say that
Please,
I think,
please go ahead.
Yeah, just to complicate things a bit. Justice, of course, is about putting things in its place, but that begs the question as to what that place is. I think, according to the Quran, there's a notion of balance. The term al-mawazin al-qist. So in other words, justice has to do with the balance between extremes. So for example, the balance between ifrat and tafrit, or the balance between the rights of the individual versus the rights of the community, or the balance between personal freedoms and what is due to the society, and so on and so forth. So I think that helps us to have a more specific and even perhaps a more concrete understanding of justice. Also, we need to distinguish between the justice of God and the justice of human beings. And that's the problem. We may all agree about a universal definition of justice at a theological level, but there's also the question of human beings putting justice into practice. And that is where there's a lot of disagreement. I think at that level, at the level of the justice of humans, there is such a thing as that we can make a distinction between absolute justice and relative justice, because Nursi himself makes that distinction. And that is where the problem lies, not so much with definitions, but with the actual, application, the implementation. That's where the problem lies. That's where the disputes lie. We are living in a world where what one group considers as just, another group among Muslims considers as evil, as wrong. So I think we need to sort of complicate, our definitions with what is actually happening in the real world.
And if I can also add one more thing, I think we have to refer to conscience also, because what Farid said, balance between the extremes. Now, where is that, the right place of the line between the extremes? I think the conscience really determines that. That is the conscience of the society or humanity or the person himself or herself. And it's a sensation. It is something that can be perceived. And I think the conscience will really guide us into the right, I think, act or the right line of justice there, the balance.
Yeah, exactly. I like that, in fact, discussion at the end, section on side Nursi. But of course, just in terms of, conscious, I will give you an example. Let me give you an example. A new film produced by Germans titled Sophie Scholl, The Last Days. There is a dialogue between Nazi police officers and a prisoner, Sophie. Sophie says that same law book at your hand make me criminal now, but in my laws of conscience, I am for freedom of all Germans. So that law protected my freedom before the Nazis came to power.
Açık bırakmış annen.
Before Nazis came to power, that same law protected my freedom, liberties, while now it restricts my freedom. So I can distinguish between them through my conscience. And of course, the Nazi officer just will laugh and will not accept such a thing, because conscience is your conscience. Can we say that it's a universal conscience? It is, again, according to, in your opinion, it is universal. So it is not easy. Conscience is an important, of course, point of reference, but still, unfortunately, it is subject. So we might have a question, another debate on this, I think, and we'll have justice in terms. Debate on justice, relations between ibadah and justice, justice in terms of its origin. If you have, of course, we may justify justice only through Esma al-Husna or thanks to via Esma al-Husna, but in secular terms, justice is justified via social contract theorist hypothesis and, of course, on utilitarian grounds. And sometimes just as we see in Kant, in rational maxims, propositions in the form of categorical imperative. These are all questions, and we may extend, of course, the definition of justice more wider. But now, at this point, I may go on, and we will come to those distinctions as Professor Vedatas referred to. Absolute and relative justice and its translation into practice. Okay. I think we will come to that in many connotations of the term adalet and adalet in relations in human beings, Allah relations, in human being in relations between human beings to human beings, and in relations between human beings to nature around us, let's say nature or the universe. We'll come to that, I think. But now I want to go on and come to the first classification of justice in terms of legality. So justice, legal justice is concerned only with the distribution of penalties for wrongdoing and of course rewards for the benefits. In this way, we have two forms of legal justice. One is procedural, the other one is substantive. Maybe procedural or formal justice, or whatever you want to call it, relates to the rules made and how the rules made and applied. So how to make a judgment about justice, the way, the method, the rules are procedural formal justice, which is of course quite important. And second one, substantive or concrete, or in the words of Kant, categorical justice is the rules themselves, whether they are just or unjust. And of course, here we have a question in terms of the relation between justice and legitimacy, because this issue is closely related both in the context of procedural and substantive justice. So if laws are binding, as I said, under the, let's say, Nazi regime and under today's so-called liberal regimes, or I don't know, national regimes, or national and native regimes, so on. Why do we obey the laws? Because we believe that as citizens, as believers, I don't know, the laws are just. If you believe that they are not just, they are unjust, still do we have the moral obligation to obey these laws? So here, just before going into the details of the legal justice in its two forms, my question is, can you justify civil disobedience, or can you, how can we justify, or can we justify civil disobedience? I, for instance, object the practice of, let's say, I don't know, not, we will have a, for instance, poll tax in the, at the end of 1980s in the UK. There were, you know, big demonstrations in many cities of the United Kingdom, and people objected to this. At the end, Thatcher's government declined from the law, and so you don't have now, I think, tax poll in the UK, but still, are tax polls just? If I consider that it is not just, then how can I, you know, obey to this law? Or, you know, we had a ban on headscarves. So students, let's say, in universities or public employees are bound to, you know, to be in line with this law, but they consider it illegitimate because it was unjust. So they had many demonstrations, or of course peaceful demonstrations, and they objected to obey these laws. To what extent they can be justified? So what is the limits between public order or the right to put, you know, laws and to object them in the name of justice and legitimacy? Do you have any, is there any contribution in this regard? Or shall I go? Okay, let's skip this question, and I will go on a little bit more on procedural justice, Usuli, adalet. We have a famous, you know, saying in Majalla, which says that Usul, Esasa, Mukaddemdir. Procedure precedes the substance. It is very important. So all legal systems operate according to a set of rules to ensure that justice is applied, and these procedural rules can take two forms. Poor procedural justice, it is just a matter of, you know, a formal way of applying rules, like as the example of a running race or a lottery. It is just, the application of a rule. So in court of law, we know that how a just outcome can be assured, the way the set of rules that can. My question is again is this: if you accept that, if you have such a rule, a law, white and black people are not equal. That's the rule. And then if a judge fairly apply this rule, then can we end up with justice? Can we say that it is the justice that we apply? Yeah, of course, procedurally it is, can we say that it is, we have a procedural justice because unequals are treated unequally. That's the definition of equality here. Then procedural justice in its extreme may lose its sense. So procedural justice is important, of course, and fair treatment, equal treatment, principle of equal treatment, of course, is quite important, but it may go to the extreme and lose its, meaning. Do you have any question or contribution in this regard? Or I'll go on. Substantive justice. Any contribution? No. Okay, substantive justice is related to the outcomes, not the procedures. If we need to guarantee that the outcomes of judgment must be, just. So this substantively something needs to be just, fair, impartial. Anyway, for instance, if you say that women cannot vote in this liberal, modern liberal order, women are not eligible for voting, then this is considered unjust. Not why? Because womanity, femininity is not a setback or a hindrance for voting. If you consider this as a setback for voting, then this is considered. This is not just. This is the principle of substantive justice. So substantive justice in terms of punishment may take three forms: retribution, deterrence, and rehabilitation. Retribution claims that justice, the aim of justice is to take in a kind of revenge. You may satisfy the feelings of the let's say those who are damaged. So you have to satisfy their feelings. The penalty must satisfy their feelings. Deterrence must assure that no one can dare to commit a crime. You may give such a penalty that it must have deterrence, or the penalty must guarantee rehabilitation of those committing crimes. All three, purposes of punishment leads to different conclusions in procedural substantive terms. So the aims of punishment may vary in terms of substantive justice. What do you prioritize? It depends so on your prioritizing in your priorities. What is more important to you? To you as a political movement, or as part of society, or as part of any religion? What is the purpose in punishment? Retribution is. Do you think retribution is more important, or deterrence is more important, or rehabilitation, or all of them? So substantive justice may change according to the purpose of punishment. We come here, as Nietzsche said, to Western society transposed all values So you cannot substantively justify any value. In the absence of Allah, you cannot say that, you cannot have the notion of absolute or universal. The modern society lost its universal, lost its absolute, the idea of absolute. So you cannot say anything that are universally valid. Everything is relative. It may change from society to society, from period to period, from even person to person. Enlightenment put, instead of Allah, let's say the individual as a pseudo-god. So individual, like an ape, is the smallest part of society that cannot be divided. So individual is it is the same in the Kant, is the final arbiter of his interests and values, and he will decide what is good or bad. Then how can you establish and keep a society as a stable society, and how can you differentiate between just and unjust? So here we need a universal reason or lawmaker, and just here a naivety of the modern society. The question here is, the notion of human rights embody a universal justice. Everything can be justified in the name of, human rights, civil and political set of values justified under the heading of human rights. Who defines human rights? In line with what? Why do we accept human rights valid in American society, in German society, in Turkish society? Why the same human rights may prevail in all different societies? In the absence of, the absolute, in the absence of a universal reason or lawmaker, can you justify just in the name of reason, the tyranny of reason, or in the name of what? How can you justify human rights? It is just a matter of, conformity, or what? Is it a sign of hypocrisy, or is it a manifestation of the weakness of the humanity, that there is no other way to justify a right? So, for instance, political rights and civil rights, other than the notion of human rights. Any question or contribution?
I have a question.
Yeah.
If I could.
Sure.
We know that normatively, behavior should reflect morality, and morality should be an outgrowth of our epistemological basis,
Sure.
and our epistemology should reflect our ontology.
Yeah.
But today we find that behavior is actually determining morality, and with it, it's determining justice. So there's been an inversion, really, of values.
So
how did this come about? How did this happen?
Yeah, it is. This is, based on, names the Sharia as a divine rahmah, lutfi ilahi. In the absence of such a universal, lawmaker or Sharia, human incapacity, to put absolute or universal maxims brought the humanity to the brink of might is right. How, no matter what you say that we have, you have your rule of law, we have human rights here that determines our practical behavior. No, unfortunately, in the last analysis, it is who are stronger defines the rules of the game. If you steal a small thing, you will be punished severely. But if you make, if a thief that play with billions and millions of dollars, you can wash them up in many channels, and you will establish charity foundations, and you will just be a kind of modern hero. This is just hypocrisy, I think. So the practice, if the practice determines your values, your morality, your epistemology, this is just, the triumph of a kind of materialism, unfortunately. No matter its form, it may be Sophism in the ancient Greek, or now it may be, liberalism. I don't know, whatever it is. It's not important. It is the same that prevails, unfortunately. It is the maxim that yes, the stronger determines the rules, and the rules serve their interest, unfortunately. And sometimes, despite all the rhetoric of unfortunately, human rights also is instrumental in terms of securing national interest or partial interest. You may call it group interests, party interests, I don't know, or political interest. So human rights is just an empty, unfortunately, an empty concept that are instrumental in terms of securing, unfortunately, the interests of the stronger.
But this is very new, isn't it? This idea of behavior determining morality. I mean, it's not sort of articulated so boldly as that, but that's what the case is. If you think of recent issues in the UK, for example, the same-sex marriage.
Yeah.
The notion of same-sex marriage is determining our laws. It's determining what they think is justice. Now, this is a complete inversion, because
Exactly.
behaviors are determining how we pass laws, how we make laws and pass them.
Yeah, but I think, for instance, in the period of Prophet Lut, maybe it was not a marriage, but homosexuality is commonly, accepted norm in society. Which here we have an approach by Patrick Dowling in order to give a partial answer to this question of relativity. What we must take as the point of reference for determining what is just is to observe the principle of the common consensus, the majority. If a majority considers something as fair, it is a little bit related to the notion of conscience as well. A kind of, if it is, wider society, if a wider society accepts it as just, then you must observe this as something just.
And that's the tyranny of the majority, then.
Kind of that. In terms of the root theory of democracy, you may say this is, the will of the majority, the naked majority, not qualified by anything, by rule of law or any other thing. It is a nude notion of Sawad Azam. If most of the population or society accept something, then you may go on with that. For instance, I think in the 1930s, most of German society, I think, justified the Nazi regime and became part of it. So this was maybe Nazi justice valid in Germany, a kind of, as I put in the question for debate, we have a couplet by Rudyard Kipling, the famous Indian-born British poet. The East is East and the West is West. The two cannot be the same. So justice cannot be universal. What is just in Iran may not be just in Britain. So let's accept it this way and go our way. Play the game in this way, because this is taken from a British judge, Patrick Dowling, the notion of man on the Clapham omnibus. That is the wisdom of the average man. you take the wisdom of the average man. Now the wisdom of, if the wisdom of the average man, you know, accepts the same-sex marriage, which is interestingly enough, this was so in Ireland. In Ireland, same-sex marriage was approved by a referendum, not by the parliament. So is this just, or how can be justified? So this is just, you know, a way, a gate to escape, but to where? I think this is also a form of, you know, materialism, justified in the name of the commonly held views by the majority. Yes, it has, of course, a merit in it, because what the majority observes as something just, sometimes in that context, depending on the context, may be considered as such, but you cannot produce any universal standard of justice or fairness from the majority in a particular society or in a particular period. So there is no way out, it seems. Yeah. Any contribution?
I think that
how much do you have to go? Our time is up.
Really?
Yeah.
Then I will go to the end. I will just point to the social justice in terms of who gets what. You may take it needs or rights or deserves as the three criteria in terms of, you know, dividing or distributing rewards, benefits, and disadvantages in society. And this is what the social democratic approach would prefer as needs. Things need material things, benefits must be distributed according to the needs of people. This takes an egalitarian stand and represented in John Rawls' theory of justice, and justice as fairness. And the counter argument will come from liberals. They will take rights as the basis of distributing these rewards. So you have a much more liberal but non-egalitarian perspective in terms of deciding who should get what, and the conservatives will reverse our entitlements and deserves and will mix them. So social justice is another way of classifying justice, and I will come just to the end and have some points from the perspective of Said Nursi. Yes, putting things in the right place, of course, is the classical definition of justice, but justice in existential terms can be observed in the universe, can be observed in the human beings himself. So justice is the pillar of the existence. Its definition is possible only in reference to Hakimi Adil. In this regard, we may talk of justice that are prevailing in the world of human beings as human beings, vicegerents of Allah. So his purpose is a journey, to complete a journey for perfection via ilm and dua. And justice here, as Professor Farid mentions, refers to not just taking things equally, but balance, notion of mizan. There is a tawazun and mizan in everything. Everything is created through taqdir, qadar, miqdar, and mizan. So you cannot find any excess or deficit in creation. Everything is created unbalanced, and this is Tekwini Shariat. In fact, nothing is arbitrary or wasteful. We have a unique and delicate balance, which is putting things in the right place. Is the definition of Musfat Adalet, and it is we observe this Musfat Adalet in the human body himself and all creatures in the universe. This is absolute, and we learned this from Ta'lim-i Esma to the Prophet Adam. So we know the relations, how the relations between the creation must be, and how our relations to them must be. This is, of course, can be differed from the notion of Ta'lim-i Esma. Sorry. Yeah. Here we have, of course, other the necessity of the hereafter and divine punishment again as a complementary of this musbat adalet, menfi adalet, because we see that even in quote-unquote natural world and human world, there are many calamities, there are many persecutions that are left without any punishment. So we don't observe absolute justice. Of course, justice in its fullest form relates to Esma Husna, but they, in terms of their projections of tajalli in practice, of course, creatures are not, do not have kemal, so they show it in a, non-complete fashion. So we do not have absolute justice, neither in the universe nor in our human beings, human world. So we need to have a kind of, notion of menfi adalet, this which necessitates the existence of hereafter and divine punishment in this context, in terms of comprehending, adalet and counter concept Usul, the question of human beings make wrongdoings, but Qadar always just according, justly. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Then
someone is talking over you the whole time.
Sorry.
Someone has their mic open and is talking over you the whole time.
Can you off your microphone?
Professor Waqfi, can you hear us? Professor Waqfi, can you hear us? I think Professor Waqfi should mute his microphone. I am trying to mute, but it doesn't allow. I think anyway, let's continue, and I think I should text him.
Okay. We have, of course, the notion, the matrix of justice in Risale Nur is very wide. I try to form a matrix, but I will not provide it here. But the notion of adalet-i mahza and adalet-i izafiye is not easy, to contextualize. Of course, we may locate these two concepts under the notion of legal justice, but it combines both procedural and substantive justice together. This notion of adalet-i mahza and adalet-i izafiye. By adalet-i mahza, Said Nursi, of course, means absolute, complete justice. There can be no difference in terms of no difference in treatment in terms of the whole or parts. There is no scaling or degree in this in the application of this justice. It is the same. It is a supplanted leveler, let's say, justice. It is the same for an ant or an elephant. It is the same for an ordinary human being or a king. The liberation of one is no less important than that of the whole humanity. So this is both procedural and substantive, I think. In terms of adalet-i izafiye, relative justice, it's not an easy one. If you don't have an absolute justice, and if it is not possible to apply the absolute justice, if the conditions is not ripe for absolute justice, then you have adalet-i izafiye, which means that you have two evils. You have to make a decision between two evils on factual grounds. So you will prefer the lesser evils.
That's the adalet-i izafiyya, but that stems from a necessity, not an arbitrary pragmatism or not your ungrounded suspicions. If an adalet-i izafiyya relates to arbitrary pragmatism, easiness, or wahm, i.e. ungrounded suspicions, it is injustice. This is not justice. But what we have mostly, unfortunately, in the context of adalet-i izafiyya is that easiness and ungrounded suspicions determines the definition and application of adalet-i izafiyya. So in the name of adalet-i izafiyya, you just disregard the rights of individuals, quote unquote individuals. So you may create a room for legitimacy of any act that can be called, in fact, unjust. So Bediüzzaman, in his letter to the Prime Minister of the period, Alparslan Sheikh Adnan Menderes, in the 1950s, the leader of the Democratic Party, that three maxims of the Quran must be observed. These are, of course, the first one is this: وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. The second one is سَيْدُ الْقَوْمِ خَادِمُهُمْ. And the third one, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. So this is the base of the polity. You cannot make discrimination in terms of, race, nationality, mazhab, religious affiliation, things, or party, or ethnic or class-wise. You cannot make any discrimination in this regards, and Said Nursi puts absolute emphasis on this. This emphasis on this notion of وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى, which is mostly understood in the context of rejection of the origin notion of Christian original sin, but it is transferred here into the observance of justice, that crimes and punishments, the basis of the rule of law, are personal. You cannot make them collective. You cannot collectively make any group, criminal. You cannot consider, for instance, Kurds as a criminal ethnic group, or I don't know. You cannot discriminate against them because of their ethnicity, because of their language, because of their nationality, because of their political affiliation, blah blah blah. So this is in fact hamiyeti jahiliye, because what is preserved here, what is here try to be preserved is just your interest defined along your clan, along your group, along your party, along your nation, along your nation state, I don't know, along your flag, national symbols, so you discriminate against them. Bediüzzaman just put emphasis on this, and remembers the rulers of the day that if you want a just and stable society, then you must observe this three maxims, Quranic maxims. And here, I think you can relate justice to the positive action, because to protect, public order is one of the pillars of the positive action. And in order to protect public order, you need to adhere to the supremacy of justice. And this is we see this in his saying, hakkın hatıra alidir, hiçbir hatıra feda edilmez. Kind of, right prevails over might. So these are related to Said Nursi's emphasis on adalet-i mahza. Of course, this is again in his interpretation of the historical events, like the incident of Jamal. So the power quarrel between the companions of the Prophet. This is important in terms of comprehending the position of Hazrat Ali and the position of others. And in terms of rejecting the prevalence of the practice or the practical, interest. What is important here is as categorical, ethically, morally categorical right that hakkın hatıra alidir. You need to observe substantively what is right. You cannot relativize it just on the pretext of your whims or what comes to you as pragmatic stance. Our maslaha requires this or that. No, you cannot justify just on this ground and just leave adalet-i mahza aside. This is not accepted by Said Nursi. Again, social. I will just end now. I think conclude. Social justice is another form of justice emphasized by Said Nursi in terms of stressing the importance of wujub zakat and hurmeti riba. These are the source riba, interest and usury. I will not make any distinctions between these two terms. Interest, let's say, and of course, selfishness are the source of all social and political discontents. And Islam rectifies these two, important, let's say, problem areas through making wujub zakat and hurmet riba as essential for a stable society. Again, this is also important, but let aside these two things, we lost, maybe we may add a third one, this is the institution of qarz hasan, lending and borrowing, and we don't have it now. And it is within our scope of, let's say, decision making, but so we are kind of doomed to a system of interest-based banking. And yeah, the last, my last, slide is related to the Ottoman notion of circle of justice. Let me say this: this notion of just society is inherited from Sassanids. So this circle of justice, in fact, is divided by Sassanids, but it is Islamized by, let's say, Ottomans. So Ottoman has their own ideal just society. But I will just pose the question of Ibn Khaldun here. In fact, it is just two sides of the same coin. Is it is it just society, or is it just the other face of the state of mulk, a state based on power, let's say? So we have a just a circle. There is no beginning and end. You may start in any place. You may start from justice, or you may start from state. In order to have a society, a stable society, you need to have a state. For a state to survive, you need to have a law. This law needs to be, supported by public order. Public order requires an army. An army needs to be fed by taxes, money, and money requires an economic activity by people. So you need a people, and people need to, in order people to give tax, you need to keep them to keep them in just way. So justice will rule, and then the state will become stable, and you will reach happiness. This is again stated in the 16th century famous Ottoman writer Kınalızade Ali Efendi in his Ahlak-ı Alai. Ahlak-ı Alai, the moral of Ali, let's say, his name is Kınalızade Ali Efendi. He repeats the same thing and projects this as a just society, which Ottomans call Kanun-ı Kadim. So this is a social political order that is in balance. So the purpose of the rulers is just to keep this balance. That is just to keep the continuance of no change. If you keep disorder, then the justice will prevail. So all the literature of siyasetname refers to returning back to Kanun-i Kadim, the old tradition based on this notion of circle of justice. Unfortunately, I will conclude here with the observation of Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun just says that the ideal society is the as a society or polity is the polity based on Sharia, but it is unfortunately not observed in practice. So I will start from the state of mulk. So what we observe here, justice in the context of mulk, but the Said Nursi's emphasis is not on mulk, but is on the right and to keep justice as adalet-i mahza whenever possible. Thank you for listening. And now I wait for your contribution and questions. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a very good discussion, especially at the end, going to Ustaz's idea of justice also. The way, though, I perceive that Ustaz is really referring more to the practical aspects rather than the theory of justice. I hope I'm not wrong. Now, the floor is open for questions and comments. We don't have much time left, but maybe 10 minutes. At the end, I would like to discuss, also if you have any suggestions for the format of our webinars or any comments, how we should proceed. We already know Hakan can give us more information about that. Just a few more minutes, if we talk about that also, that will be good. So we will proceed from now on according to the way you are, requesting. So any questions or comments, please go ahead.
I had a question about the format. Are we doing this at 1.5 hours or 2 hours? What was the, or shall we leave that to the end?
1.5 hours is sufficient as far as, I am thinking. But if there are any other suggestions, we can consider.
It's because when you said that Ahmed Hoja was out of time, I was wondering how much, what you meant by that. How much time did he have?
Yeah, I meant, normally we give 50 minutes for the presenters.
50, okay.
Yeah, 50 minutes. But this time I allow, because I think the way I would expect that there will be less questions. That is why I allowed him to continue until he wants to stop.
Oh, I see, okay. No, I could have listened to him all day. I just wondered how much time we'd given him, whether...
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
So any questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Okay.
Maybe I begin with Ibn Khaldun. It's good that you raise the the Ibn Khaldun's critique of the circle of justice. I think in today's language, Ibn Khaldun would have considered the idea of the circle of justice as ideological, because it was designed to prop up the stability of the state, of the dynasty, under the guise of thinking, under the pretense of being concerned with the justice of society. So that was Ibn Khaldun's criticism of that. But in addition to that, I think Ibn Khaldun was not impressed with this idea of the circle of justice, because to him it was normative, and not that he was against normative ideas, but he wanted more than that. He was interested in the analysis of politics and of government as it was, not with an understanding of the ideal state or the ideal dynasty or the ideal polity, but with an analysis of it was. And that leads me to our discussion about Nursi. I think Nursi had a concern with justice at both levels, at the normative level, and also what I would call the positive level. Positive meaning, you know, in economics, as you, I'm sure you all know, that distinction is made between normative economics and positive economics. So positive economics has to do with the analysis of actually existing economies, rather than normative statements about what the economy should be. So I think Nursi was concerned with justice at both levels, the normative and the positive. But my question is, you know, what is the extent to which we need to engage in scholastic definitions, scholastic discussions, including, you know, fine-tuning the definition of justice, bearing in mind what is happening in the world today. It seems to me that those who are moral do not need convincing. On the other hand, those who are immoral, who are unjust, you know, the oppressors, the mustakbirin, as we say, they can't be changed because they are in it for power and prestige and so on. And related to that also, I think there's a tendency, and I'm not referring to you, Dr. Ahmed, but a lot of the discussions I find too abstract. Again, you know, from the spirit of Nursi, Nursi engaged in abstract discussions, but he was also very concrete. Concrete in two ways. He was concrete in the sense that he referred to historical you know, examples. When he talked about Sayyidina Ali, for example, he made that distinction between the absolute justice of Sayyidina Ali as opposed to the relative justice of Muawiyah. We made that distinction. But he was also concrete in the sense that he actually was involved in politics. Well, not in party politics, but, you know, he was trying to influence government. He went around mobilizing support. He tried to convince rulers of, you know, certain initiatives. So he was actually involved, and he fought in the war. He was actually involved in societal struggle. So he was not an armchair theoretician sitting, you know, taking a step back and sort of engage in theological, scholastic discussions about justice. So my question, and I guess it's a challenge for all of us, if we were to truly follow Nursi's spirit, wouldn't it mean that we would not only define justice and theorize about justice, but we would also behave in a way that public intellectuals behave? You know, this idea of public intellectuals, that intellectuals are not only, or should not only be teaching and theorizing, but they should be involved in what is happening in society in some way, you know, whether it's in terms of politics or as part of, you know, a social movement, working with NGOs and stuff like that. Because that would seem to me to be in the spirit of what Nursi did. Of course, the context was different in his time. He wasn't involved in NGOs, but he was involved in, he literally fought. And he did try to influence government and rulers. And my last point is this, and this is in the spirit also of being more concrete. When we speak about injustice in today's context, the context is different from Nursi's context. In today's context, the institutions that create injustice would involve capitalism, patriarchy, racism, and sectarianism, just to name a few. So therefore, I think in today's context, a Nursian approach would call for a critique of such institutions. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. The question is then to transfer the Nursi's teachings, of course, into the concrete problems of today's society. And this is what we mean by public intellectuals. That's the question, and that's that must be the position to concretize the what is called positive action in practice. How do you form a public position stance in such questions as you said, for instance, nationalism, patriarchy, of course, and national interests, I don't know, and other areas of injustices. And that's the question, of course, and it's not just a theoretical matter of theoretical speculation. The matter is that to observe this, how to observe this in practice, and that's what we need to do.
Okay,
Yes.
Dr. Ibrahim has something to say, I think.
Yes, thank you, Ahmet Hocam. I joined you on my way to Istanbul, and at the last part, I joined at my home, and I really enjoyed your talk. And you said, you know, with Nietzsche just discovered we lost the ultimate foundation for any values with the death of the gods. But in the East, let me say, or in the Muslim countries, although we have still the justice in the absolute sense, it's based on the name of Allah. The justice is based on a universal value. The skies, the earth, everything is based on justice. But in practice, in the past and today, we just see one interpretation of this justice is imposed on Muslims. What do you think about that? There is, although the justice is absolute, it has a universal value, but different interpretation of justice in the practice is not allowed for Muslims.
Yeah, in fact, it is the same question with the ijtihad. You know, we created as an art
I can't hear anything. There's a problem, I think, with the voice. Hakan, there is a problem with the I think connection.
Problem with Ahmet Hoca's side. Let's wait a couple of seconds. It happened 2 times. Ahmet Hocam, can you hear us? I think we are having.
Do you hear me now?
Okay.
Yeah, I lost the connection, unfortunately.
Okay. Go on. Ahmet Hocam, we couldn't hear your last minute.
Yeah. That's the question, in fact. You know, they might impose this or that in the name of justice. You know, all cruelties, persecutions can be justified in the name of, unfortunately, in the name of Allah or Islam. We see many examples of this. You know, so I think the most important thing, unfortunately, is again subjective. You must stick to the spirit of the ikhlas, you know, as in the process of ijtihad. What do you see as just must reflect your subjective will or conscious, just you know, to observe in the best way the will of Allah. If you are sincere to yourself, if you prioritize the will of Allah and the Quranic maxims, then you will try to reach the best notion that fits what Allah means by adalet. So you know this in political terms as well. But if your party affiliation, national affiliation, mazhab affiliation, or political affiliations determines your behavior, then you are away from the spirit of, you know, ikhlas. Then you lose your adherence to the notion of haqq. So you prefer, in the words of Said Nursi, you know, the dominance of your nafs. Then this is, you know, something extreme, thoroughly secular. You prefer this world to akhirah. We cannot say anything to this, unfortunately. And that's why Nursi's insistence always is on the morality. This is the same in Munazarat, this is the same in Khutbeh Shamiya, and all the time. You need to observe these moral principles of Islam in your life. That's why Quran terms the Muslim Ummah as the Ummah Wasat. Wasat means balanced. Wasat means just Ummah that is freed from upper and lower extremes, Ifrat and Tafrit, and try to be to show, you know, the beautiness of the Islamic morality. If you do not have Islamic morality in practice, why the mushriks of Mecca couldn't deny in Prophet was that he never lied. They had absolute trust to him. They never said that he's a liar. No, that's not possible. He's a trustee for them. But today's Muslims, unfortunately, are not so. If you are a Turkish, if you are an Iranian, if you are a Kurdish, if you feel yourself first as Kurd, as Turk, or as an Iranian, or as a Shi'i, as a Sunni, or as a, in terms of your political affiliation, if that is what defines you, then Islam is not there. It is your nafs that prevails there, unfortunately. That's our question in terms of, you know, public taking public responsibility, in terms of transferring Sayyid's, you know, emphasis on these moral maxims. Yes, I think Nursi scholars too have responsibility.
Well, thank you very much.